to Tall Tales and Cocktails.
I'm Severin Beekman.
And I'm Liz Shadis. And this is our podcast.
Our first episode.
Episode 1, the grand premiere. So, Severin, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I was born and raised in the Midwest and currently live here in central Illinois. I am a part-time pyrography artist. I also make and sell jewelry. I sculpt and sometimes dabble with stop-motion animation. I also have a hobby of making art out of dolls and dead things I find. When I'm not selling or making art, I also perform with 217 Burlesque and Curiosities. Shout out to them. I dance and I also perform with Fire. I'm also a lover of sci-fi and fantasy books, movies, and games, and also a proud parent of 2 fluffy cats, Jonesy and Leo.
Your cats are the best. I love your cats. Spoiler alert, we're both huge nerds.
Yes, we are.
Like I said, I'm Liz Shadis. I'm also born and raised in the Midwest, central Illinois area. Come from a little farther up north, but basically live here now. I also dance with 217 Burlesque and Curiosities. It's a great time. Play with Fire as well. I like video games a lot. I play a lot of video games. Been really into Sea of Thieves lately. Get to be a pirate. It's a good time. And Killing Floor 2. Like to kill some zombies. Lots of zombies.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur writer. Aspiring to maybe someday not be amateur, but probably not. And yeah, that's about it. I dabble in art and just like to have a good time. So let's talk about some mythology and the whole purpose of this podcast.
Yeah. Why do you like mythology, Liz?
I've always been fascinated by mythology. I was homeschooled growing up, and I like the first memories of history classes with my mom that I remember were like Egyptian mythology and Greek and Roman mythology. And it's just really interesting. It's cool to see how cultures, legends, and lore influence how they interact with the world around them.
Right.
It's really interesting.
I grew up loving unicorns. Just gonna say that. We will have a whole episode about unicorns.
Oh, absolutely. You have to.
I grew up loving unicorns. I read books about them, watched movies about them, and...
Which is so funny to me that you love unicorns because your general aesthetic, like,
yeah.
You wear a lot of dark colors and black and, like, dead things. And so when you told me that your entire childhood bedroom was unicorns, that one threw me for a loop.
Yeah, I definitely had a transition from, like, liking unicorns where I had to, like, tell my mom, like, okay, like, I liked unicorns, but now, like, I don't. I like dead things now. And, like, I collect bones and
God,
stuff.
Mom, I like dead things now.
Yeah. So, she was pretty sad about that. But if you go to my childhood home, my room is exactly the same. There's unicorns everywhere.
That's wonderful.
Yes. But I've just always loved stories and how, like, you can easily, like, lose yourself in them. You know, it's a lot
Absolutely.
like daydreaming, like the, you know, fantasy worlds that you kind of immerse yourselves
Exactly.
into.
And, like, ancient cultures had such rich stories, you know? Like,
Right.
we have rich stories now, too, but, like, it doesn't influence our culture in the same way. Our belief systems aren't based on our movies and our books. Like,
right.
Back then, though, like, their stories were all about their religion and their everyday way of life and why they did what they did.
Right.
It's fascinating.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we can kind of dive into the Norse creation.
Well, we should probably talk about the drink first.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, we're a little tipsy.
Which comes, you know, it's inspired by the Norse creation. Indeed. The drink is called Fire of Muspelheim.
Yes, the Fire of Muspelheim. It's delicious.
It's a bit spicy, a little sweet.
A little sweet, a little spicy. It's got double shot of Fireball in it. I do like a 3 to 5 second pour of cran apple juice and then just a tiny little splash of grenadine to give it some extra red. And it is quite yummy, so I hope you're drinking one right along with us right now.
You can almost taste the fiery primordial flames.
Yes. It's a fire in my belly for sure.
So, what is a creation myth? Exactly. A creation myth is a culture's story and how the world was formed, typically called a cosmogony. Cool word of the day.
It is a great word, cosmogony. Actually, side note, I meant to tell you this earlier, but I actually wrote my own cosmogony, or started writing it, because I'm building a world.
Ooh.
Yes, it's quite fun.
That's awesome. So, intro to the Norse myth. Norse mythology stems from the northern Germanic tribes of the 9th century, now Iceland, Sweden, Norway. The stories are translated from poems from the Edda by Snorri Sturluson. And we should also include some of our sources that we've used to do our research. NorseMythology.org. I've also drawn a lot from Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman.
Nice. Yeah, sources are important. We do use some direct quotes. We'll try to call them out when we use them, but if we forget, don't sue us. But
Yes. Yes, and we are not scholars by any means. So.
Not at all. We are just two mythology lovers who want to learn more about it and talk about it. And what better way to do it than on a podcast?
And share it with you. So, we will dive right in to the creation myth of the Norse world. So, first, you have a big hollow gap of nothing called Gununa Gap. It's found between Muspelheim to the south. It's hot, full of billowing fire, and also between Niflheim to the north, which is cold, icy, foggy, chock full of primordial darkness, and it also has poisonous rivers.
Ooh.
So between this space, some of the fire begins to melt the ice and melts into these droplets that creates Ymir, which is the first of the giants. It's a hermaphroditic giant, both male and female, and is also known as a sand screamer, is what the name translates to. The melting ice also creates a cow named Odunla. This cow's huge and can produce milk for days. Ymir.
Milk for days!
Yes, literal days.
I saw, when we were researching this one together, I did see that it was called the Primordial Cow, which I think it's hilarious that there's a primordial cow.
Yes.
In mythology.
I just love that there's a cow that's just huge.
Giant cow with lots of milk.
Yes. So, Ymir drinks this milk, and the cow, Odumla, licks salt to create the first god, Buri. And the salt, I don't know where the salt originates from exactly.
Right! That's so confusing. Why is there salt? I thought there was nothingness. Does fire and ice make salt? I don't think so.
I don't know. I guess there's just like this cosmic salt block out there somewhere.
Is Gununa Gap just really salty?
It might be.
Is salt nothingness?
I mean, everything else is pretty dire. And
the empty void of salt?
Yes. Cosmic salt blocks.
Cosmic salt blocks. Yes.
So,
I like that.
While Odunla is making gods from salt, Ymir is sleepy, I guess from all that milk, and falls asleep. While asleep, Ymir creates two giants born from its armpits, a lady and a dude giant. So the lady giant mates with our dude Buri, born from salt, and they have a son, Bor. Bor marries Besla, a descendant of giants, and they have 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. You've probably heard of Odin, also known as Odin. So, you have these 3 brothers brought into existence where it is still a void of life and no real meaning. To the north, it's cold and dreadful, and to the south, it's hot, and the floor is basically lava.
The floor is lava.
Yes. This is when shit gets real. They slay Ymir to create the worlds. Through death comes life.
Through death comes life. But would that be a hate crime? If Ymir's hermaphrodite? Is that the first hate crime in
the first hate crime of this
in the Norse
world? Yes. So, yeah, through this chaos comes creation. But it's kind of weird the way that this creation story unravels. So, they take Ymir's body and create everything. So, the blood becomes the rivers and oceans, flesh becomes the soil, bones are turned into mountains, the teeth are formed into pebbles and sand, the hair is...
Gives you a new term for teeth grinding, like a new image.
Yes,
like
yeah.
Really grinding
that's like probably what they
sand.
did. They just
ground
it down. They're like, make sand.
That almost ruins the beach for me.
Maybe that's why Ymir is known as a sand screamer, because
they ripped out his teeth,
screaming. I mean, you're kind of like born into this crazy existence to begin with, and then like killed.
Someone starts ripping apart your body and building a world out of it before your eyes. That's pretty fucking nuts.
Just like, ugh, it's awful.
Ugh.
So then they take Ymir's skull and turn it into the sky. The brain is turned into clouds, and the eyebrows are turned into the world of Midgard. And it's protected by Ymir's eyelashes to protect it from giants and other nasty.
So does he have like magic eyelashes, or are they just real sturdy?
I want eyelashes like that.
Right? I'm just picturing this giant with like the most beautiful eyelashes, just lashes. Gorgeous.
I know. Lashes to die for. So, yeah, they create this whole world made and created from Ymir. They also made people. They were like, this place needs some fucking people in this here place. And so they found some logs, an ash tree and an elm tree. And they breathed life and free will into them. And they carved these logs into the first man and woman, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
And they called them Ask and Embla. So Ask being ash and Embla being elm.
That's very cool.
Yes. I also just think it's kind of funny that they just like found some logs that like washed up from like the sea of made from blood.
Right.
And they're just like, that looks like a man.
Let's make it one.
Yeah.
Like the woman log floats in, and it's just got perfect like tits and white.
Yeah. Like,
that looks like a lady.
It's a lady. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna not sing anymore.
I love it. You can sing anytime.
So, there you have the creation of Midgard and all of its, the beginnings of it. And so Midgard was just one of 9 worlds created. We already discussed 2 other worlds, Niflheim and Muspelheim. There was also Asgard, where Odin lived among other gods, known as the Aesir. There was also Vanaheim, where the Vanir tribes of gods and goddesses lived. There was also Jotunheim, where the giants lived, Alfheim, where the elves lived, and I'm going to butcher this, but Svartalheim, where the dwarves or dark elves lived, and Hell, the world of the dead, and home to goddess Hel.
Very cool. 9 worlds.
Yes. And we will probably dive into
those worlds eventually.
Yes.
As well as the gods that reside within them and creatures of all sorts.
Right.
I'm sure we'll do an episode on elves. You can't talk about mythology and not talk about elves.
We will definitely talk about elves. I love elves.
Me too. Anything elven is great. I think this myth is really cool. I was actually just thinking about it, but so Midgard is supposed to be like an orderly world, right? They were trying to build structure,
right?
Because they were trying to escape the chaos of the abyss and then the fiery world or the icy world. But in order to create this order, they have to commit this horribly chaotic act. Like, you're murdering the first ever being and ripping him to pieces.
Right.
It's it's very interesting how they formed order from chaos.
Right. I kind of like that concept, and actually, like, you sort of see that in other cultures or other stories, too, like other creation stories. Even in ancient Greek, like, Olympus was created through chaos and war.
Yeah.
And even if you look at the Bible, in the book of Genesis, that, I mean, it's considered chaotic, but it's talked about as being almost like a good chaos.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in that story, it also talks about, like, there being no form.
Yeah.
And
it's just formless, void of nothing. And then it's structured into an entire world.
Right.
Which is very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So, with that, is there anything else that we want to talk about with creation myth, or should I get into some apocalypse stuff?
I say we can talk about apocalypse stuff.
Let's do
talking about chaos, I think, you know, when you talk about the chaos of the creation of things, I'm kind of curious to hear about how chaos comes into the end of times.
I thoroughly enjoyed researching it. I pretty much solely used NorseMythology.org because I think it was very well written, and it covered pretty much everything, including the two different endings, which we'll get to in a little bit. But so the Norse apocalypse myth is called Ragnarok. I'm sure that's not pronounced correctly. I think it's actually more guttural, but I can't roll my R's.
Ragnarok. I love it.
Which translates to the fate of the gods, which is pretty cool, I think. But let's get into it. So basically, whenever the Norns decide, which the Norns are like the spinners of fate. So you see that in Greek mythology and Roman mythology too. There's the fates, and they spin time and they cut it and decide when people die. Well, there's a similar concept in Norse mythology, and they're the Norns, who we'll probably cover at some point as well. And they will actually decree when the end times begin, kind of like heralding in the end times. And there's going to be a super long winter, and it's going to be harsh and cold, and everything's going to die, and the humans are going to have to scavenge for everything, and the winter...
That's common, right?
Right.
Like,
it's
in
almost...
stories where, like, shit's going to happen, it's like first there's some, like, long-ass winter.
Exactly. It's like Game of Thrones. Winter is coming. I've only seen the first, like, 5 episodes of Game of Thrones, but all I remember is...
the whole thing.
The winter is coming! The winter is coming!
Always a bad sign.
That's actually the first thing I thought of when I was reading about this was Game of Thrones. But they actually call this long winter Fimbulvetr. Fimbulvetr?
That's a word.
Yeah. It's a word, all right. But it's basically going to last the length of 3 winters, which sounds like hell. I don't know how long their typical winters was. I probably should have looked into that more. But even just our winter, can you imagine 9 months of winter? I would lose it. My seasonal depression cannot handle that. Yeah. I would be a horrible mess by the end of it.
Same.
But basically what's going to happen, since they're all fighting for survival, this is a direct quote here, it'll be an age of swords and axes. Brother will slay brother, father will slay son, and son will slay father. So everyone's just going to be killing each other for resources and to survive. Which is pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
Also, you see that a lot in other end time myths, like even in Revelations, you see people turning on each other and
absolutely
stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly the timeline if the rest of this happens at the end of the 3 winters, but after that there will be 2 wolves named Skull and Hati.
We'll go with Hati.
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 I don't know. Hati wolf.
It's really hard to find pronunciation on
it. Is. I had a rough time, especially with some of these wolves. There's a lot of wolves in the in Ragnarok, and I could not find pronunciation.
I feel like we need to find a friend in Iceland that can, like, give us some sort of, like, idea of pronunciation on some of this stuff.
Yes, if you're listening to this and you know someone in Iceland.
Yeah, or if you're from Iceland.
Or if you're from Iceland.
If we've reached you,
hit us up on our Facebook.
Please message us and tell us what we're saying wrong.
Hit us up on Facebook. Facebook.com/TallTalesPodcast.
Yeah, shout out.
Come find us and tell us how to pronounce things so we don't sound like dumb Americans.
Right.
So these two wolves have been hunting the sun and the moon since the beginning of time and just could never seem to get them. I mean, it makes sense. The sun is cycling, the moon is cycling, and the wolves are just constantly chasing it. Round and round, like dogs. Chasing their tails, essentially. But they're going to actually catch their targets and devour the sun and the moon. And also the stars will then disappear from the skies and it will be a great empty void looming over the earth.
Everyone's freaking out at this point.
Oh yeah, can you imagine if you looked up to the sky and there was just nothing there?
Yeah.
No more clouds, no stars, no sun, no moon, no planets, just emptiness.
The beginning of the end is
that
happening.
Sounds
at that
like
point.
my nightmares.
Yes.
And then there's the great tree Yggdrasil, which we'll probably also touch on at another time. But the tree will start to quake and all the other trees and mountains will crumble to the ground. And the monstrous wolf Fenrir will break free from his chains. He's been chained up. I think we could do a whole episode on all these wolves, honestly.
I think so,
and
too.
I think that would be super
Let's do
cool.
a wolf episode.
Yes.
In the Norse world.
Yes. But he'll break free of his chains and set off to cause more chaos. And then there's the world sea serpent, Jormungand will rise up, flooding the land with the seas. So he's gonna... He lives in the abyss of the ocean and just swims around constantly usually, but he's going to rise up out of the water, and as he rises up onto the land, it's just going to spill sea everywhere and start flooding everything. And the great tremors caused by Yggdrasil and Jormungand caused the Naglfar, or Nail Ship, to sail free from its mooring. And this ship is gross. It's real gross. The ship is built from dead men and women's fingernails and toenails.
I love this idea.
It's real gross.
It just makes sense.
Wait, we could build a model. Just start saving your nail clippings for the next.
My boyfriend leaves them places for me to find, I think, on purpose, I swear. But,
Start collecting them and we'll make our own Naglfar.
Yes.
And we can post
We'll post a photo on our Facebook of our nail ship.
I'm about that. Let's build a nail ship.
In the future.
Yes, I'm about it. The Naglfar will be manned by mighty giants, an entire army of giants, the forces of chaos and destruction. And they're all descendants of Ymir, who you spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
And then the captain of this ship will be the betrayer of the gods, Loki.
Loki's always up to no good.
Always! He's the trickster god.
Up to the very end, he's just fucking causing chaos.
Always. But he will finally be free of the prison that the gods put him in and captaining this nail ship, which is still gross. And then Fenrir, going back to the great monstrous wolf, is going to open his jaw, which is very large. The upper half will stretch all the way up to the sky, and then the lower half will drag on the ground, and he'll just start devouring the world as he runs chaotically, swallowing up everything in his path, and he'll have blazing fire in his eyes and his nostrils. And then all the while he's doing this, Jormungand will be poisoning the land, the sea, and the air with his venom. So, not so peaceful and orderly anymore. Everything is either being devoured, covered in water, poison,
toxic.
Fire, or being destroyed by giants.
Yeah.
Quite toxic indeed. And then the fire giants of Muspelheim will burst through a great crack in the dome of the sky, and their leader, Surt, will wield a burning sword with flames brighter than the sun. Their thunderous footsteps they're going to cross the Rainbow Bridge, Bifrost?
Yes.
That connects, to Asgard from Midgard. They're going to cross that bridge, and their thunderous footsteps are going to actually break it, and it's going to collapse behind them, separating Asgard and Midgard. And then a great horn blast from Heimdall, the divine sentry, will warn the gods of the impending doom as the giants approach.
He's like, hey, little help.
Right? The horn has a name, and I forgot to write it down. I kind of want to find that real quick. What do you think about the myth so far?
Oh, I do love a good end myth. You know, end times myth, for sure.
They're just fun. Terrifying. And I'm sure being a Viking, knowing all of this has been prophesied and stuff is actually quite terrifying.
It's an incredible visual to imagine all of these things happening. And it
simultaneously.
And it almost seems like a chain reaction of things that are occurring too. Like, you know, you have like these floods that are happening, and then like Fenrir's just like broken from his chains, and just like one bad thing after another.
And the floods like release the nail ship that's just been moored, and like it's just pure chaos. Like I can't even imagine. It would be really incredible to watch from a very far distance.
Yes.
The horn is called the Yaller horn.
Yaller.
The Yaller horn.
Y'all are fucked is what he's saying.
Y'all are fucked. I like that. The Yaller horn of fuckery. Where was I? Yes. Okay, so the gods are going to consult counsel from some wise being. His name is Mimir, or the head of the Mimir. The wisest of all beings for counsel, and Odin is going to seek out some counsel and decide what they should do. If this has been prophesied, though, and they know it's going to happen, you'd think they'd already know how they were going to respond to it. But, I guess if you need to talk to your therapist first, that's cool.
Just like, before I get into this shit.
Before I go fight and do all this crazy stuff, I wonder what my therapist thinks about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the gods are ultimately going to decide to join the battle. If you can call it a battle, at this point, it just sounds like a complete, sounds like a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
The final epic battle will take place on a field called Vigrid, which translates to plain where battle surges. Odin, accompanied by the Einarjar, which is a group of chosen human warriors that Odin keeps with him in Asgard, will meet Fenrir the wolf head on, just go charging right at this giant wolf as he's devouring everything around them.
Everything in sight.
They've got balls.
Dude, brave as heck.
I wouldn't run up to a normal wolf, let alone
the one that's eating everything.
A giant wolf that is devouring everything. They will fight valiantly and wound and tear at the wolf, but ultimately it'll all be in vain, and the great wolf will swallow up Odin and his army of men. But Odin does have a son, and he will be enraged by the death of his father and seek vengeance upon Fenrir. And his name is Vidar. And he's going to slay the great beast by holding open this giant wolf's mouth. He's going to stick his boot into the mouth of the wolf. This boot is made from every scrap of leather that has ever been discarded by a shoemaker.
So resourceful.
Look at that recycling.
I just want to point out how resourceful these gods are. Like, all the time.
They didn't let
we don't even let dead men's toenails go to waste.
They're
let
very
alone,
resourceful.
Scrap leather.
Absolutely.
Make a boot out of it that can stop a wolf.
If there's any message here, it's the fact that you should definitely recycle.
Yes, and keep everything.
Recycle, reuse.
Yes.
Repurpose. Absolutely. But so he'll have his boot, like, in the mouth of this giant wolf, and then he's gonna shove his sword down the throat of the wolf, ultimately killing him. And so that'll be the end to Fenrir's terror and devouring. No more lunch for him. Heimdall and Loki will slay each other. There wasn't too much on how this happens. They're just gonna kill each other. There's another wolf. So many wolves. Garm. And then Tyr, another god, will also slay each other. The god Freyr and Surt will be each other's undoing. So the giant leader Surt will be killed by Freyr, but will also kill Freyr in return. There's no real winners here.
It's like a bunch of cancellations.
Yeah, just like, I just want to know how they're killing each. I should have looked into it a little more, and we'll touch on it again when we cover the gods, because I think it'll be easier to find more information about this in the individual god stories.
Right.
But it's just like, in my head, I'm just imagining two gods running at each other with like swords and just simultaneously stabbing each other.
Yeah.
Not really sure how everyone's dying. And finally, Thor. Everyone knows Thor.
Yes.
Everyone knows Thor. How can you not? He's a beautiful man.
Loves him.
Thor will slay Jormungand, but will also die by the world serpent's poison. It specifically says that he will emerge victorious, but he will have absorbed so much poison in the process of fighting the world serpent that he'll walk 9 paces away and just drop dead from being overwhelmed by poison.
So yeah, another case where they just like kill each other.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of a time when this is like total side story. When I was a kid,
Love a good side
I
story.
caught a praying mantis, which you're not supposed to do because they're like endangered, so don't do this ever. But I caught a praying mantis and the spider, which I don't know, I didn't ID it, but it was in my yard, and I put them in a terrarium together.
Oh no!
Just to see what would happen if they crossed paths.
Science experiments.
And I just like sat and watched it, and like they killed each other initially.
Oh my god!
Like, because the praying mantis like stabbed the spider, but like I'm pretty sure the spider like poisoned the praying mantis because the praying mantis was like half of its side was kind of like going limp, like
oh my god,
like it was becoming like numb.
Was it a poisonous spider?
It was black and yellow and had like a crazy design on the back, so it might have been, at least to this praying mantis.
Yeah.
And like they both died, which I felt really bad about, but it was really cool to
You
watch.
made like a little coliseum for bugs.
Yeah, and so like I don't know, I guess that happens in nature sometimes. Like
yeah, I guess things can just and that's true. The Vikings are very nature oriented.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of why maybe they saw similar cycles like that in nature where animals
it's like
kill each
before
other.
you die, I'm gonna poison you.
Yeah.
Before I
Very
die,
cool.
I'm gonna poison you.
Right?
Yeah. Anyways, sorry.
Yeah. No, that was a great side story. That's kind of hilarious. I'm just picturing little baby Severin with her little bug coliseum.
Yeah.
Like,
what would happen if they crossed paths?
That's adorable. That is super precious. But after the world serpent is slain, the remains of the world will sink back into the nothingness, leaving only the void of Ginnungagap. So kind of return to where everything started, and it will be as if creation never happened. But is this the end?
Or is it like a do-over?
Right, exactly. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, because different, I guess you could say tribes, there's different versions of Ragnarok with different endings. And in one, it ends after everything sinks back and there's nothing left but Ginnungagap. But in later versions of the myth, there's actually a different ending. And we get a little bit of a happy ending.
Yeah.
Which kind of spoils the chaos, but sometimes a happy ending's nice. But basically, a smattering of the gods will remain afterwards, including Odin's son Vidar. He was not killed by Fenrir. Vali, Baldur, Hodor, and Thor. And Thor's two sons. Thor's dead. Thor's two sons, though, will survive.
I feel like those gods probably just, like, didn't try as hard.
Right,
They probably, like, found a rock to hide under, and they're just like, we'll wait it out.
They're just waiting it out. They'll fight. They'll take care of it. They're so, like...
I mean, Thor's got a big hammer, so he'll, like, you know, just kind of slay and just
he's
watch.
got it. Yeah, and Thor's sons' names were Modi and Magni.
Pretty neat.
They'll after also survive. And surprisingly, 2 humans survive. A man and a woman will survive the chaos by hiding in a special wooded place called Hodmimi's Holt. I don't think I'm saying that right, but Hodmimi's Holt.
I feel like that makes sense, though. Because I feel like in stories where if there is, like, an end times, like, someone does kind of have to escape, because if you are supposed to rebuild from that point.
Well, I mean, even in Revelation, like, there is a new earth created at the end. Like, everyone is sent to heaven, but then a new earth is created, and it's supposed to be perfect and paradise. Which we'll actually get into that in a minute, because there's some theory on why there's 2 different versions. Mm-hmm. But the man and the woman are Lith and Lithrasir, Life and Striving Afterlife, which I thought their names were really cool, that they happen to be the ones to survive. But Hodmimi's Holt translates to the Wood of Hodmimir. So I'm guessing it's like some kind of magical or spiritual place that kept them safe from all this horrific craziness happening around them. And that pair will get busy and populate the land again. So they're just going to have to pump out a bunch of babies.
Yeah.
And then to replace the sun, the daughter of the sun will rise as a new sun, instilling life and warmth back into the earth. And a new almighty ruler, which I couldn't find out exactly who this was, but a new almighty ruler will preside over the new beginning and ensure that peace continues.
Let there be peace.
Let there be peace. No more chaos, and no more wolves, hopefully.
For now.
I'm sure Fenrir wants to come back and kick some butt. He sounds like he's still hungry, probably.
Yeah.
But so that Norse mythology website that I use, norsemythology.org, had a theory on why there's 2 versions. You start seeing the happy ending version after there was a Christian influence in Viking culture. So it seems like it might have been inspired by the stories that they heard from Christians and stuff like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, which makes a lot more sense. And then the original story is more pagan before they had...
Better story.
I mean, it's pretty epic. All this crazy shit happens, and it just descends into nothingness. And all that's left is Ginnungagap, the real winner of the story. Happier stories are boring.
Yeah.
Ginnungagap
is
just
my opinion.
The only winner here.
Yeah, back to that Ginnungagap.
Yep. That's a tough one.
Ginnungagap.
That's a hard one.
It is.
And then, I thought this was interesting to think about as well. So, in Viking culture, all these myths were well known. You know, these are legends and stories that are being passed from person to person. Mm-hmm. And they're all very aware of their ultimate demise. And I was kind of curious on how you think that would, like, affect Viking culture, or, like, how they act in society, like... Because Vikings were all about war and battle and dying valiantly in battle.
Right. Yeah, I feel like you'd probably have a separation of those who are, like, almost, like, true believers in, like, what their fate is. Yeah. And, like, would want to die. And, like...
Because ultimately, everything's going to die anyway, so what does it matter?
Right.
Yeah. I know, it's just interesting that, you know, like, even your gods are going to be killed and destroyed. Like...
I bet there were deniers.
Probably. There almost has to be, because to have, like, this idea of a deity, like, they have to be, in a way, for you to have faith in them, all-powerful.
Right.
Or immortal, or something like that, which clearly, in this case, they're not.
They would never let this happen to us.
Exactly. So, I can only imagine that you would have these differing, opinions.
Right.
And, like, people groups that just don't agree with all of the
and
gods.
Even just, like, how it would end. You know, like, different stories on, like, you know, how the ending will actually come out into play.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It's very interesting, for sure. Well, that is the Norse creation and end time myths.
Yeah.
Or Ragnarok.
All wrapped up.
All wrapped up in a neat little bow. But for our next segment, I guess you could call it, since this is our first episode, what we kind of want to do is tell our myths, kind of talk about some discussion points we might have, or just see where it naturally goes. Or, I mean, obviously we'll probably end up on tangents. There's a bit of alcohol being consumed.
Yeah. It's Fireball.
Yes.
Muspelheim.
Fire of Muspelheim.
Yeah.
It's delicious. But we want to also talk about pop culture that's inspired by Norse mythology or whatever topic we're talking about. But since it's just kind of general myths, and I think the only thing I can think of directly that is influenced by Ragnarok is Thor Ragnarok, but I've never seen it, so I don't know if it actually has anything to do with the end time myth. Or if they just use that name. But so obviously the Marvel universe is very influenced by Norse mythology. You have Thor and Loki. Yeah.
And Odin.
Odin's in it, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't really watched
the Thor Ragnarok Marvel film kind of touches base on the end of things. Oh, cool.
There. I'll have to watch that. We should have a movie night.
Yes. It obviously is, you know, a Marvel version of the story. I mean, like, the Hulk is in it. The Hulk is not in the original story, of course.
Yeah, the Hulk's not in there. I must have missed it.
But, actually, yeah, that's one of my favorite movies of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I need to watch more of those. I haven't really watched any of them. I saw the first Avengers and the first Thor, and I think that was really it of that full, like, that whole universe's version of the Marvel universe.
We should watch Thor Ragnarok together.
Yes.
Because actually, there's Hel, who we touched base on briefly. She's in the movie quite a bit.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, I think in the movie her name is Hela, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But, yes, she is in that movie, and she's awesome. She's badass
very cool.
bitch.
I can't wait to talk about some badass goddesses. I'm very excited about that.
Same.
There's some really badass goddesses out there. J.R.R. Tolkien also said that Lord of the Rings was heavily influenced by Norse mythology, which you can see in even the writers of Rohirrim. Their dress is very similar, and their cultures. You've got elves, dwarves, giants, giant trees
that walk
and talk, very slowly. The Hobbits, though, that I think was an original idea. I don't think he pulled that from anywhere. I think that was pretty exclusively him.
Yeah, I think so too.
Sword Art Online, the anime, also is inspired by Norse mythology, and I know the last time we had talked about this, I couldn't remember, like, anything Norse about it, but I do remember, if you want to watch this, there might be spoilers here, but, in the anime, like, it's a virtual game that all these kids are playing, but that it's like a headset, but they can't take the headsets off and they can't log out, and they get stuck in this game, and if you die in the game, you die in real life.
Oh no.
Yeah. it's a whirlwind. But at the very end of, or it might be in the middle, the way the show is divided up is very weird. It's a couple seasons, but at one point, the main character, Kirito, like, finds the developer of the game and takes this world seed and, like, makes a new virtual world that you can log in and out of.
Oh,
and I believe they call it Alfheim.
Oh.
And, like, you can, like, fly and stuff in it. So I think that's where that connection comes from. And then there's also a bunch of video games inspired by Norse mythology, like God of War, the newest one, which is so good and so sad in the beginning, like, almost cry.
Tearjerker.
Yeah, big tearjerker. But that actually takes place in Midgard, and Loki's in it, and I believe Odin is in it, and one of the other goddesses as well. I thought it was Freyr, but Freyr's a god, not a goddess, so I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah.
I might have my names mixed up there. And then Assassin's Creed Valhalla that just came out is also all about Viking culture, and Odin is badass in that one. I will say that. I watched a little bit of my husband playing it. And then also there's a new video game coming out that you might actually like. I'm very excited about, but it's a survival, it's like a survival crafting game called Valheim.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and you're a Viking, and you just build your, like, Viking town, and it's multiplayer, and that sounds really fun, too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Lots of pop culture out there.
Yeah, there really is.
Yeah.
We can post some of this stuff, too. If,
absolutely.
Movies,
yeah,
books.
we'll always include links to stuff that we talk about in our description, and also post stuff on our Facebook about things we talked about. If we ever make this nail ship, which I kind of want to.
Dude, I will save all my toenails.
I will save my toenails and fingernails.
Get out the hot glue gun.
I'll get my partners to save their toenails and fingernails. We'll have plenty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so gross, but I just really want to see if it's possible.
It'll be like a small one.
Yeah, just a little teeny tiny baby ship.
Yeah. Like one that you put in a bottle.
A little baby ship. We can get some bugs to put in it. We'll make a little bug ship.
There we go. And
we can make 2 of them. And instead of just having a coliseum for your bugs to fight, you can have a battleship arena for them to fight.
Actually, that'd be perfect too, because if we got like a beetle that has like little antennae, like that's sort of like Loki.
Yeah!
Like, he's got like the little horns.
Yeah,
like...
we can make a little skit out of it. It'll be great.
Yeah. That'd be so good.
I love this idea.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah. But I think that wraps up our Norse End Time and Apocalypse officially.
Yeah.
We don't have too many thank yous right now. I want to give a shout out to Ralph Shank for helping me figure out how to use Audacity, because I'm audio editing inept, but we're getting there. Yeah, I think that's our thank yous for now. If we think of any later, we can always add. But stay tuned for our next episode.
Yes, next time on Tall Tales and Cocktails, we're going to talk about some sea monsters.
Sea monsters. We don't know which ones yet. But
yeah.
Sea monsters are the topic.
We'll have a drink to go to that episode as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Do we even know what we're drinking yet?
Oh,
yeah, we do.
Yes, we do. I'm going to make Kraken barrels.
Yeah.
More on that later. I'm not going to tell you what's in the recipe now.
Yeah, you just have to stay tuned.
Yep, stay tuned for some Kraken barrels. Thank you so much for listening. Check out our Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. That's all @ however you internet Tall Tales Podcast. So.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
That's us. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye, y'all.